Andre Rieu, The Man Who Turned Tears into Music, Part 1-3. There are men who play the violin, and then there is Andre Rieu, a man who doesn't play notes, he breathes life into them. For decades, his bow has glided over strings like a whisper of forgotten dreams, turning every melody into an echo of the human soul. His music isn't heard. It's felt deep within the quiet corners of the heart where words can't reach. Andre was born in Maastricht, a city of winding cobblestone streets and quiet cathedrals, where even the air seems to hum with old waltzes. His father was a conductor, a man of discipline, precision, and silence. From him, Andre inherited not only the gift of music but also the weight of expectation. In that house, joy had to be earned, and love often sounded like correction. As a child, he would watch his father's orchestra rehearsing, rows of violins shimmering under golden lights, each musician following the baton like obedient stars in orbit. But little Andre was drawn not to the order, but to the chaos that hid between the beats. He wanted to feel music, not just perform it. While others followed rhythm, he followed emotion. He saw in every note a pulse, in every rest a sigh, and in every melody a story waiting to be born. Yet his journey was never meant to be easy. Behind the laughter that would later fill his concerts, there was a boy who often felt invisible in his own home. The strictness of his upbringing carved silence inside him. When he played alone, it wasn't for applause. It was for survival. The violin became his only confidant, the only thing that listened when no one else did. As he grew, so did his rebellion. He began to question the rules of the classical world. Its stiffness, its distance from the audience, its belief that emotion should be restrained. Why must music sit on a throne? He once asked himself. Why can't it dance with the people? And so began his lifelong quest, to return music to the hearts of ordinary souls. He formed a small orchestra, not grand or elite, but human. They weren't just musicians, they were storytellers. He dressed them in colors, not black. He made them smile on stage, not hide behind the score. And when he played, he didn't face the music stand. He faced the crowd. He wanted eye contact, laughter, tears, connection. He wanted to waltz with the world, but the world didn't waltz with him at first. Critics called him unserious, commercial, even a clown in a tuxedo. They mocked his dream of blending elegance with joy, calling his shows too romantic, too theatrical, too simple for the halls of classical music. He was heartbroken, but not defeated. He knew that even the most delicate flowers bloom in the cracks of judgment. He kept playing. The year was 1994. The stage lights were dim, the audience small, and the dream still fragile. Andre stood before his orchestra, a group of believers who shared his madness. As the first note of the second waltz drifted into the air, something miraculous happened. It wasn't just a performance. It was a rebirth. The crowd began to sway. Old couples clasped hands. Strangers smiled through tears. And somewhere in the back, a man who hadn't danced in 30 years took his wife by the arm and stood up. It was as if time itself had remembered how to feel again. That night, Andre Rieu didn't just play music. He resurrected it. Within months, the second waltz swept across Europe like a soft storm. People played it at weddings, funerals, birthdays, moments when words fell short. The melody became universal, a language spoken by hearts instead of tongues. Young Andre's dream had crossed borders that critics could never map. But success is a fragile friend. Behind the glamour of sold-out tours and glittering gowns lay exhaustion, loneliness, and the weight of a world that demanded perfection every night. Andre smiled for the cameras, but in the quiet of hotel rooms the silence returned, the same silence he once knew as a child. There were days when the music wouldn't come. His hands trembled before concerts, his mind heavy with fear of failure. Once during a tour he fell ill and thought he might never play again. The violin felt heavier than ever, as if the joy had drained from its strings. But when he looked into the eyes of the people who came to see him, he remembered why he started. Not for fame, not for applause, but for connection. He began to see music again, not as sound, but as healing. The waltz wasn't just rhythm, it was therapy. He realized that when people danced, they weren't escaping life. They were remembering how beautiful it still could be. Andre's concerts grew larger, brighter, almost cinematic. He filled stadiums that once echoed with football cheers. now humming with violins. Under open skies, thousands of candles flickered as he played The Blue Danube. The night air shimmered with laughter and tears, and even the stars seemed to pulse in time with his bow. He would often close his eyes mid-performance, feeling the crowd's heartbeat merge with the orchestra's. In those moments, it wasn't a show anymore, it was communion. Humanity breathing in harmony, and yet fame brought its own ghosts. He was no longer just Andre the Dreamer. He was the maestro, a brand, a symbol. Every ticket, every recording, every TV special demanded the same magic. And magic, he knew, cannot be manufactured. There were nights he questioned himself. Have I become what I once resisted? Am I now the conductor of a machine instead of a melody? But then, one evening in Maastricht, his hometown, something extraordinary happened. As he played before thousands under the summer sky, he saw his elderly mother in the front row. Her eyes glistened, her hands trembling on her lap. When their gazes met, time collapsed. For a brief, sacred moment, he wasn't the maestro. He was the little boy who had once played the violin in his father's silent house. And that night, as the crowd rose in thunderous applause, Andre didn't bow to them. He bowed to her. It was his way of saying, "Thank you for the silence that made the music possible." Fame, no matter how grand, eventually fades into something quieter. Legacy. And for Andre Rieu, that legacy was never about gold records or sold-out arenas. It was about the invisible thread he had woven through millions of hearts. A thread of comfort, nostalgia, and healing. He often said, "When people cry at my concerts, they are not crying because the music is sad. They are crying because they remember something beautiful." And that was the secret of his genius. Andre did not compose pain. He translated it into grace. In his later years, the maestro began to slow his pace. His hair turned silver, but his eyes still carried that same boyish wonder. The wonder of someone who never forgot what it felt like to be moved by a single note. The world around him grew louder, faster, and more digital, but his art remained timeless, untouched by trends. Rooted in emotion, he would still walk on stage with his signature smile, the audience rising like an ocean of light. Yet behind that familiar grin lived decades of sacrifice. Missed birthdays, sleepless tours, the quiet ache of an artist who gave more than he kept. He had built a kingdom of sound, but every empire, even one made of music, is born of loneliness. In interviews, when asked how he sustained his joy, he would laugh softly and say, "Because the world needs beauty." And perhaps that was the truest line ever spoken by a musician. He believed beauty was not a luxury, it was medicine, something the soul needed as much as air. There was one performance that defined everything, his concert in Vrijthof Square, beneath the same sky he grew up under. Thousands stood shoulder to shoulder, the air warm with memory. As he lifted his violin, the city held its breath. Then, with a single bow stroke, the night bloomed into melody. The waltz rose like light from the stones, twirling through the streets, brushing against the windows of the old houses, touching faces young and old alike. Some danced, some wept, and as the final note shimmered into silence, Andre closed his eyes. In that stillness, he felt something eternal, as if all the years, all the tears, all the miles had finally led him home. After the concert, he walked through the empty streets of Maastricht. The lights were out, the crowd gone, the square silent. But inside him the music continued, gentle, endless. He realized that the real concert was never the one before the crowd. It was the one between his heart and the universe. He had once said, "I don't want people to just listen. I want them to live inside the music." And perhaps that's what he had given to the world. Not just performances, but portals into memory, moments of peace in a chaotic world. Years later, when the documentaries would play his story, the boy who defied classical conventions, the man who made millions fall in love with waltz again, his name would stand not as a musician, but as a healer, someone who reminded humanity that beauty, though fragile, could still save us. And somewhere, if you listen closely, you can still hear him. A violin drifting across the night, weaving light into darkness, stitching laughter into sorrow. Andre Rieu, the man who made time dance, the man who turned tears into music. And yet, even after the final bow, the world still whispers his melody. In every wedding where two souls sway to a waltz, in every hospital room where someone finds peace in his music, in every lonely night where a song becomes a companion, Andre's presence lingers, unseen but deeply felt. Some artists chase immortality through fame. He achieved it through feeling. The notes he played were never just vibrations. They were memories shaped in sound. They carried laughter, longing, heartbreak, and hope. They carried life itself. And in a century where everything fades too quickly, his music remains like candlelight in a storm, trembling, yet unextinguished. Today, when people speak his name, it isn't with the weight of legend, it's with the warmth of gratitude. Because through him, millions learned that classical music isn't a wall between the stage and the crowd. It's a bridge that leads back to the heart. And so, as the screen fades to black, the last image lingers. A violin resting quietly under soft golden light. No audience, no applause, just silence. The same silence from which his journey began. Then faintly, almost like a memory, the waltz begins again. Not loud, not grand. Just enough to remind us the music never truly ends. Andre Rieu, the man who didn't just play music. He taught the world how to feel again.